Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of What's Your Issue? This is episode number 20 of the People's Weekly Comic Book Review Show. As always, I am one of your co-hosts, Ms. Agasicles from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Here with me, as always, I have Mr. Stephen Moore. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing good.
Good. So we have some pretty exciting stuff to talk about tonight, just because it was a bit of not a weird week, but for whatever reason, each of our individual pull lists happen to have things in it. I actually feel like there were things in it that are more akin to what I have historically been accustomed to reading. But that type of content hasn't necessarily been available on the market. It kind of all converged in a weird, perfect storm this past week with a lot of books that were not necessarily capes and tights books. And they, incidentally, a lot of them also made it onto the agenda for tonight. So I'm pretty excited, Stephen. How about you?
I don't know. The week was okay for me. I did have the same feel you did, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily.
You probably read more. You probably read different books than I did, but
yeah. Well, we'll see. I think actually, I looked at the agenda. I think actually we read a lot of the same stuff. I don't want to say. I'm not going to say that necessarily the review scores trended higher. I mean, we have definitely in the past month or so definitely had higher review scoring weeks, but it's interesting in terms of the type of content that we both read and that wound up landing on the agenda. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First up in the reviews rundown tonight, and if you don't know the format or the shtick of the show, here's the deal. The two of us get together on a weekly basis. We talk about anywhere from, maybe 8 to 13 comic books. 6 of them we review in pretty excruciating detail, and that is at the top of the hour in our review segment. Then we talk about the one book for each co-host that was our absolute best read of last week. And then we go through our honorable mentions, citing any books that stood out, either for really good reasons or potentially even really bad reasons, or just if it was a kind of a quirky book by a very particular creator that's outside of their norm. We might mention that in honorable mentions as something that might be worth going to check out. Finally, we round out the show by running down our upcoming pull list for the next new comic book day, which generally is 2 days after we record, since we typically record on Monday nights. Heads up, be forewarned, this is a spoiler cast, so we are going to talk about the books in whatever detail we so choose without due regard for trying to keep anything secret, because you can't really review something unless you talk about all the stuff. Now, for a particular reason, we might shy away from a really big reveal. I think now that I've got a little case history for us, I think that tends to not be the case. So expect that if the book's on the agenda and it comes up, we're probably going to talk about everything, including those critical final page reveals that you often get in a particularly significant book. Let's get started with the reviews rundown. At the top of the list tonight is Justice League number 18. Written by James Tynion IV, art by Pasquale Ferry, and letters by Tom Napolitano. The situation in this one is, here we go again with the Legion of Doom perspective, and this is going on for quite some time. If there's a knock that I have against the book I've been mentioning over the last few weeks, that I really don't know how much longer you can keep this up. This has been 18 issues now of just the Justice League and the Legion of Doom, essentially. And while the Legion of Doom is definitely the pinnacle arch nemesis of the Justice League, I don't know that I need the Legion of Doom in every single issue of the Justice League. This time around, it's a little bit more of a talking heads issue. The first few pages, in my opinion, were kind of rough because they were the typical nonsense drivel that you get when two villains get together, because it's about Brainiac and Lex Luthor and them verbally sparring, and then eventually they kind of bond throughout the issue. But the first few pages are just the stupid, you're stupid, no, you're stupid, no, I'm the smartest criminal mind, no, you're the smartest criminal mind. And it's like the two smart kids in 5th grade who didn't really know how to do a good burn, or what we called in my lifetime cut down. And it's just silly banter back and forth. So that's what the first few pages were like. And then admittedly, the the book then very much matures, and you actually get this really poignant story of two admitted kind of geniuses in the DC universe who come to their intelligence from different vectors, but one of whom, in this case Lex, has a more human ability to actually leverage more emotional intelligence than Brainiac does. I find this interesting because it is a thing that I think you go through when you are more senior in your workplace or in things that you do. You start to consider skill sets that you haven't leveraged. There's actually a really good book called The Leader's Shadow that talks a lot about, in the second half of your career, leaning on skill sets that you don't have. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit of what Lex does in this issue. The art in this issue by Ferry is good, pretty solid. He's not the regular artist. He definitely came in, maybe for a guest spot. He might be on for a few issues. It's not the best that I saw this past week. That will probably go to Exo Manowar, which we will talk about in the show. But still, it's pretty good. Most of my problems were it floats a little bit in inconsistency, where he cuts back and forth between maybe 2 or 3 different styles. The ones that were the most off-putting to me were the ones that were a little too cartoony. It definitely started to kind of lean towards like a Dragon Ball Z kind of feel. Not full-on cartoony, but definitely leaning more in that direction. But I will say the tone of the story and the art did pretty much stay in sync throughout the issue. Even when Ferry gets a little cartoony, that doesn't really grate against the story. And it almost felt like those shifts were almost natural or organic stylistically to the scene that was being set in the script. There's also a lot of a feeling of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of in it. When you go back and look at his name is escaping me now, the principal writer on that book. But
Alan Moore.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of feeling of the character models are a lot more rounded out. They're kind of very skinny and still like in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but the place settings and how things were lit especially kind of felt the same. And that's one thing I will mention about Ferry that I did really like is that if you look carefully in the issue, there's points of luminance in almost every single one of his panels. And he particularly uses that. There's not a ton of shadow work in the book, which could probably be something that could be a little bit improved. But in many of his panels, he has a very specific point that the light in the scene in that panel is originating from. I mean, he kind of plays with that as he goes throughout the panels, and I thought that was very interesting. There are times where it feels a little bit overly, and particularly where the light is like so bright. Like I said, there's not a lot of dark panels in the book, but I thought that was of interesting particular note. On the story side of things, the beautiful thing about the story is that it's not the norm. You have 2 villains, admittedly after those first few rough pages, but at the end of the day, it's 2 villains who actually agreed to work together. You and I have talked over the last over this whole run where I say, this thing is doomed to eventually fall apart because you can never get villains to work together long enough because they're all ego-driven. And at the end of the day, they're all going to, double-cross and triple-cross each other, while the superhero side of the formula winds up sticking together. But this is of particular interest because now you have these 2 arguably greatest criminal minds, definitely the 2 greatest minds that are part of the Legion of Doom, actually working together to achieve a historically unprecedented goal. So part of the story in this is that like the backstory and origin of Lex and his relationship with his father and who his father was entirely retconned. Very much similar to, and again, we mentioned this just last week, and I keep forgetting the storyline, the event in Marvel where Uatu, the Watcher, is murdered and therefore reveals like all the secrets of the Marvel universe, and everything that we were made to believe turns out to be like a complete fake. Like Daredevil's father wasn't a great man. He was actually like a physical abuser of his wife and his child. and and Nick Fury's actually a life model decoy and all this kind of crazy stuff. Cannot remember what the name of that was, but it felt very similar.
Sin, right?
Yes, Original Sin. This felt very similar. I'm like, what in the flock is all this stuff about Lionel Luthor? But I thought, but still, if you're going to make a choice, right, you're going to make a deliberate choice, and you're going to say, I need to do something in the story, and I need to move these characters down a certain path, and in order to do that, I have to reframe things that the readers think that they know. Okay, if you're going to do it, be bold about it, and they definitely, and Tynion definitely was. I mean, it's Tynion the Fourth writing, but as far as I understand it, this is Scott Snyder kind of architecting the whole epic. The neat thing about it, again, is that this is Lex Luthor uncharacteristically being very vulnerable and shedding a lot of his layers of defense and shielding in order to convey to Brainiac that there is a certain way that they need to proceed, because Brainiac is heading down the same path that Vandal Savage was, and Luthor's kind of lesson in the whole thing is, yes, and I killed Vandal Savage, right? Now, he's probably not going to get away with killing Brainiac, but his point is still the same, that Vandal Savage coveted the totality and the Source Wall for his own purpose, and Lex feels like what needs to be done with this is it needs to reshape all of mankind. Still, all of that being said, again, the critical problem with this is in all of this thing and all this wonder that you believe this is like Lex like growing, at the end of the day, you're left deadly believing that, either Lex or Brainiac at one point is going to double cross the other one, and this is all a big setup and a big ruse. And in the next issue, we're going to find out that nobody was being as true, as they portrayed themselves to be. Steven, did you read this issue? And if so, do you have any thoughts, counterpoints?
I actually like this one a lot. I gave it an 8.0 because I did like the whole entire origin story with Vandal Savage and Lionel Luthor.
Yep.
And I thought it was very interesting because it seems like, to me, they gave Lionel Luthor like more of the personality he had in Smallville.
Okay, yeah, right.
Like he was more involved with Lex Luthor's life and finding out the secrets of the planet, and to me it seems like that's what he's doing in here, and it's pretty interesting that he was working with Vandal Savage in this continuity, and I actually like the whole origin story about the Perpetuita thing.
Perpetual, yeah.
They the reason why Lex Luthor wants this thing because it gives some secret powers to humans. And
right.
The thing about Lex Luthor, what I like about him, is that he actually cares about humanity, and that's what makes him an ideal character in his character personality. And I just like that they Scott Snyder was able to. Well, I know James Tanley wrote this issue, but I know Scott Snyder's the lead head of the series. But it seems like that that I like that he wants to use this to evolve humanity to a point where they can use maybe powers to maybe defeat, to be a superior race. And to me, it almost seems like that, in Supergirl, the CW show, they're also doing this with Lena Luthor. She's been doing experiments on humans and trying to find ways for them to have powers and to become a superior race against aliens. And this is, to me, is like the same thing here, and I find that interesting. I also do like that that is a contingency plan for Brainiac, and I like that there's a reason why he will work with Brainiac in here. It's not just a one-dimensional viewpoint of him working with Brainiac. There's actually a reasoning. Like, he wants to use him as like a hard drive of knowledge space. Like, he needs all his knowledge, and he even asks. I mean, if he said that if there's any betrayal, I would have a plan to kill you. Like I have a safe plan. So, it was interesting to see Lex Luthor's like, don't mess with me. I have a plan, so don't double cross me. And Brainiac was kind of scared, and he was stumbling about what Lex Luthor has in plan for him if he double crosses him. And I thought that was pretty interesting. It was very solid work for me.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting in it to me is that so like you said, Brainiac's end of the deal is he'll get all of the like data, and knowledge. He won't necessarily get all of the, I guess I would say the spirituality or the emotion or compassionate component of what the totality has to transfer. And what's interesting is that's great because that's all Brainiac wants or needs to use. And so it fits appropriately. At the end of the day, I gave this issue an 8.5, so we were pretty much in sync with our feelings on it.
Yeah, I just gave it a lower score because I wasn't a big fan of the art. I didn't like the art too much.
Yeah, and I wasn't like a complete 100% fan of the art either. But at the end of the day, this issue wound up competing heavily with my pick for the best thing that I read this week, largely on the strength of the story, because this is
the story is great.
You just don't see this in comics, right? You don't see two you don't see Doctor Doom and Galactus pairing up and working together and talking through their issues and actually communicating on a highly intellectual and highly emotionally intelligent level and coming to an agreement. So that to me made it feel like an exceptional issue. Let's move on and talk about Love and Romances #1. I'm going to try not to spend a ton of time on this one because I'm trying to do a better job of tracking how much time we expend per issue, and we are running behind the curve. So this is, and actually, I'm probably not going to talk a lot about the issue itself. It's more about what the comic is. So way back in the day, I didn't go back and look at the history, so I can't put my finger on it, but Stan Lee and a bunch of his buddies at Marvel actually did romance comics. It was a thing that that for a time didn't exist in comics, and they brought it back, and then it faded again, and then they're bringing it back again. And an interesting thing that I've been thinking of recently, as I think about what do comic book nerds and geeks, the male ones particularly, always complain about. It's like, man, this movie was great, but it had this whole romance arc in it, and I didn't really want any of that in it. And I thought about this because I have kids, and I'm thinking about how to communicate and convey things to them, and there's also this discussion in games which kind of hinges on this as well. And the thing that I've been considering is when you're a kid, right, or even into your teens, and you daydream, right, or you go to sleep at night and you kind of jumpstart your own dream, thinking about the things you would love to be, many of which are impossible. But I'm like, when you were a kid and you thought about being a hero, I don't know about everybody else, a lot of, for me, in my teenage daydreams of being a superhero was about getting the girl or the romantic interest. I'm like, if it weren't for that, I didn't imagine being Spider-Man just to be Spider-Man, right? I didn't imagine being a hero. There was always some romantic objective on the other end of that, and I believe largely that's how people formulate their like and joy of these things. So it's apropos, I think, that Marvel is bringing this concept back. How the book is packaged is 4 individual short stories. So the first one is The Widow and the Clockwork Heart. So the talent on the book is a huge number. So let's go ahead and run through it. The first story, The Widow and the Clockwork Heart, by Gail Simone, Roger Antonio, I think. I may have written the name wrong. And Jim Shiralampidis. The second story, Heartbroken from Beyond, Margot Motin, Paco Dorling, Carter, and Lee Luffridge. French quartered by Dennis Hopeless Hannum, which is weird. I need to look that up. He previously went by Dennis Hopeless, and I don't quite understand why the third name is. So I don't know if that was like a stage name that he was going under before.
Yeah, it was just Dennis Hopeless.
Yeah,
I never noticed.
Well, the hope in this book it's credited with Hopeless in quotation marks. So
yeah,
there's some story behind that clearly. Anna Paula Martello and again Jim Sherlin-Pettis. And then Gone Like the Wind by John Adams and Tamara Bonvillain. All the letters were done by Travis Lanham. And so it's kind of this weird, kind of like Twilight Zone-y kind of love story stuff, as you would think, because it's comic book still, right? I think maybe the most interesting is the first one by Simone, where the preposition is that in the future, in order for humans to cope better with society, many times they will use robot surrogates for those members of humanity who have difficulties in finding love to help them through like a tough time. And in this instance, there's a human male whose wife died. And then apparently there is like a grief council, which will potentially assign you like a robot romantic interest to help surrogate you through some of these times. And it may be temporary, it may be permanent. What's interesting in how the story is framed is when the story kicks off, you don't know which one is the robot, whether it's the man or the woman. And there are several panels where apparently inside whoever the robot is, there's a small, I guess, small being of some type who is like pulling all the switches and then cueing the robot to like kiss or hug or do something. And then you get to the end of the story, and it turns out that the man is the human, and he breaks up with the robot and says, basically says, thank you very much for helping me through this tough time. Now I've met somebody who's human, and that's who I want to actually go be with. The robot actually has an emotional response or the equivalent thereof, and basically suffers like an operating system crash. And then it flashes to a panel of the little person inside her who feels horrible because this is a thing that apparently these robots go through, is they develop some type of feelings of familiarity, at least with the romantic interest. And then if they are left, they actually just like can't emotionally cope. And then basically they have to be rebooted, and then they're able to move on again. So it's a very interesting story. Heartbroken from Beyond was one about a girlfriend, fiance, young wife who died. The husband was left behind, and every time, and he refused to let her go, and so her ghost was trapped on the earth. And it's a complete short story of entirely silent panels, which I thought was incredibly effective. And basically, what he eventually figures out through trial and error is that every time he holds on to something physically that was hers, he can see her ghost. And then the story ends quite sadly with him coming to the realization that he's the thing keeping her here. And then he boxes all her stuff up and closes the lid to the box. And then she's able to move on to the afterlife. So it's like, it definitely gets you right in the feels. French Quartered is a little bit macabre. It is about a young Southern belle whose father like literally keeps her imprisoned in her room, sleeping on her balcony with a shotgun. She has found and fallen in love with a young man who has convinced her to run away with him. The night that they're going away, the father actually puts like booby traps her balcony with columns that actually have like sharp spokes on them to actually kill someone who attempts to climb down from her balcony. She goes out to meet the guy. The guy isn't there at the meeting place. What he has actually done is he's tricked her, I guess you could say, into coming to meet him to get her out of the apartment so that he can go back and kill the father, who he knows will never let her go unless he's dead. And then when she comes back, he's there and says, okay, let's go ahead and go. So again, very, very Twilight Zone, Outer Limits kind of stuff. And then I don't actually remember Gone Like the Wind.
I don't remember it.
Yeah,
it's with the guy. The guy wants to. There's a couple that wants to live forever.
Oh, right.
they decide to go into robot bodies because there's a chance that they can experience true love forever,
Right.
and they get robot bodies, and for some reason the wife, I mean they got robot bodies that weren't wasn't the beauty of their choosing. Like they looked ugly, and if disappointed, and they couldn't change back to their normal bodies. They were permanently stay with those ugly looking robot bodies, and the wife decides to break up with her husband, and so the husband's rejected, and he's like depressed and sad that his wife left him, and he ends up like shutting himself down like in computer shut off mode for like hundreds of years or 200 years, and he wakes up, these people find him in the garbage, and he sees there's like a total war apocalypse kind of thing going on the earth, and he meets this alien, he falls in love with the alien, and they have a life together. They go on they're on the bed, and I guess they're about to have sex, and someone comes in and shoots the alien down. The alien's dead, and the guy sees his wife, I mean his ex-wife, that was with the person that shot the alien down, and he talks about how his life was so horrible. Would you take me back? And she says yes, and that's the end of the story. And they're back together.
Yeah, so it's a quirky story of rejection, largely.
Yeah,
And managing that, and how you process the feelings with someone who rejected you. Interestingly enough, I just played a segment in a video game where a love interest of the character you're playing shows back up and asks you for your help, and I was like, "Yep, screw that. Like we broke up. Like I'm not helping you out."
yeah. I would have broke up with her. I wouldn't take her back. This is
Right,
stupid.
yeah,
I take her
right.
back.
Exactly. So, and like the whole time you're reading the panel, you're like, no, don't get back together with her. So, the whole point of this, I think, is now at the end of the day, I only rated this issue 6.5. The art is just, I mean, everything about the book is kind of functional. I think Gail Simone's story was the most interesting from a writing perspective. Some of the other things that kind of been done before the final story. What did we say? It was called not Gone with the Wind, but Gone Like the Wind. Was quirky and interesting. The art at the end of the day throughout the book wasn't like the most spectacular art by any means that I saw this week. And so, like I said, at the end of the day, I wound up giving it a 6.5. However, I find it interesting from its positioning on the market. That it is something different. A lot of people like a lot of these kind of small anthology kind of books that mirror a lot of kind of the way pulp fiction used to be back in the day. I'm interested to see if it. I mean, I think it might have enough sales numbers to keep it going for a little bit. I don't think it's going to be some monumentally long run. But it's interesting positioning, and it's maybe most interesting because it heralds a change in the demographics, a successful change in the demographics of the readership, which all the publishers have been trying to push for. Marvel and DC have been making changes to try and expand the pool of demographic of the type of readers they attract. I wonder if they're doing love and romances now because they've hit a goal metric that tells them, okay, now the pool of readers is sufficiently diverse that we can launch something like this and it can sustain for a while. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Did you read this? What did you wind up scoring it, Steven?
I give it a 6.5. Okay. I didn't like it too much either. The only one that stood out for me was Heartbroken from Beyond, the silent one.
Right.
I did like that one a lot, and the other ones were okay. I didn't like them too well. But yeah, the one that stands out is the silent panel ones, because I don't know, for some reason the story was much more interesting there, and didn't need to tell any words, which I found pretty interesting, and I still enjoyed it.
And it's not a story that hasn't been done before, but the fact that it was done entirely as silent panels, and the way in which he kind of evolves through figuring out what he needs to do was the thing that was kind of heartbreaking in it. So let's go on and talk about American Carnage #4. Both of us read, and I'm very interested to hear your opinions on this.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going. There's American Carnage #4. The writer is Brian Hill. Artist is Leandro Fernandez. Um, the colorist is Dean White, and the letters is Pat Brazio. And the story with this one is that from the last issue, there was like Richard Wright, the main character. He goes to his lawyer's house because of some incident that happened in the last issue, and there's a shootout in her house, and there's a shootout, and the house is shut down, and they try to go see after shutout was over. They went to go see who was doing shooting, but you don't find it. They just saw a burning cross on the on the on like some tree posts. Yeah. So they saw a burning cross there. I guess in this issue they call the cops, and the police was investigating the crime, and yeah, they was investigating the crime, and the detective decides to talk to Jennifer Morgan, which is Rich's lawyer. They decide to talk to each other and find out was there a burning cross on her house by her house, because she's a white person, and he was talking about how these things don't normally happen to white people. Was this anything had to do with your father? And she said that she said that I mean, you could tell that she feels uncomfortable with the way the detective is speaking to her, because he says that this doesn't normally happen to white people with the cross, and I guess she didn't like that approach there. And she said that she was being very secretive. Like she said, like she knows it has to do with her father, but she didn't want to confront it to the detective. So she's pretended that she this has nothing to do with her dad, that she doesn't know. She's gonna always try to figure out what's been going on her own. So the detective decides to leave her alone, and it cuts off to a part where Richard is talking to Jennifer's daughter, and he tells her, like, the daughter is wondering, why do people want to hurt her or hurt her mother, or why the world is so messed up. Like she thought that the world was, I guess sunshine and rainbows, but it really isn't. So Richard decides to tell her like a story where like there's like a castle, like some some Disney World type castle, and he tells her you could try to walk into that castle, but you'll never reach it because there's a whole bunch of monsters in your path, and that's how the world is like. There's always that good place you want to get to, but you can never get there because there's always dangers interfering with your life, trying to be in your way. So it's like an analogy or metaphor kind of story he was telling her of how life actually is, which I thought was pretty interesting. I like that aspect. And they go in the car, and Richard is wondering why he's talking to Jen about what's the situation, why there's people uh attacking her, and she just kept being secretive about it. She didn't want to tell him anything. And yeah, he kept hiding the secrets, and she kicks him out of the car, and decides to keep like she curses out at him, kick him out of the car, and she just runs off. And then there's a scene where the father is talking to the one of his associates from the white supremacy group, and uh apparently the guy is mad at Jennifer's father, which his name is Win Morgan, Yeah, he's mad at him because he's working with the cop, and for some reason they found out the cop is actually half black, and they feel uncomfortable that he's working with him or that his daughter's working with him. So they want him out. They said they want him to not work with the black guy, the cop that they're protecting, or yeah, to leave the group or not, or to don't work with him at all. They don't want him involved in this war between people, and yeah, they just didn't want him working with the cop. So Richard, I mean, yeah, the cop is Richard. I just got his name all of a sudden. So Richard is he went to go talk to his friend about what's been going on with Jen, and she's trying to figure out that you need to keep yourself alive, get away from these people. That this woman is going through some trouble, and she's trying to get him into trouble, and he just doesn't agree with his friend. He said that he needs to that everything is fine. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I got this. And he decides to go to a hotel, and there's a guy with a scary looking Obama mask in the hotel. And he decides to attack Richard with a shotgun, and there's also a scene where the father with Jen is talking to her dad about what's going on, and talk about he was talking bad about the cop, and I think he was talking about how bad he's talking about bad stuff about black people that necessarily aren't true, obviously. So yeah, he's talking about how they're junkies or something like that, and it's about he's dangerous. They don't want to work with him and stuff like that, and the back it goes back to Richard in the hotel, and he ends up getting shot with the shotgun, and Richard's on the floor, and the issue ends there. So I end up giving this issue a 8.0 because I really did like it was a very exciting issue to me. I did like the conflict that's going on, and it's pretty interesting to see that the white supremacy group did find out that Richard was half black, and it's sort of affecting the white supremacy group to split, because I know I was thinking that I'm not so sure that Win and Jen's plan was to find a way for Richard to get caught in some publicity, like some social media, where because people assume that he's a white man, but he's actually half white and half black, and he just looks white on the outside, and they're just trying to like get the social media rampage of, I guess, of a white man shooting a black cop. I mean, not black cop. I mean, not white man. At black. It's Richard being half black and half white. I mean, him posing as a white man shooting a black guy in the. Because I know the story is that he shot a innocent black guy, and the story is evolving around that. Is that they thought that he shot the guy for racist reasons, and there's a whole entire conflict of him. He lost his license to be a cop because of this whole controversy, and I think these two people, his lawyer and the lawyer's father, is trying to pit him in a bad reputation with the cop about him shooting a black man.
So explain something to me. Who? So and I don't know. You may have mentioned it, and I was trying to get the social media out, so I may have missed it. So this is a Vertigo book.
Yeah, it's a Vertigo book.
Who is this comic for? Like, who is the primary audience for this
I think it's because to me it's more of a political book. I mean,
Okay.
the
So you don't.
writer is Brian Hill, and he's a black guy, and I follow him on Twitter. I
Okay.
actually liking his book a lot, and decided to follow him on Twitter to see him, if he could discuss any points of it. And it seems like it's a political statement on how racism is now in today's world,
Okay. So
where
it's a bit of a political socio. It read to me like a noir comic, like
yeah,
almost like a hard boiled like hard crime kind of book, and I struggled a little bit to kind of nail it down, and I think for one of those reasons is like I'm trying to put it in a genre to figure out like how to approach it and get my arms around it, and I struggled with that a little bit. I thought the most interesting things were this relationship between the main character and the daughter of the leader of the white supremacy organization who clearly has feelings for him, but also is kind of semi rejecting him or whatever. So, and
well,
then
he's not involved in the white supremacy group. It's just that the lawyer that he works for, because he's trying to get himself not guilty
right,
for the crime he committed as a cop
yeah,
in the previous issues. Uh, so yeah, because he said that he shot the black guy by accident. He didn't shoot him on purpose, but the media portrayed that he did shot him and he was like a racist white man, but he really isn't.
right,
So he's trying to get out of that situation, and he found out that this lawyer that was hired for him works with is a white supremacy group, and they're trying to pit him into trouble, more media controversy trouble for himself.
yeah. So it's and the other thing I mean I don't know necessarily making a criticism of the book. It was very difficult to kind of do a drop in on it. It almost it's like
Yeah.
and again, you know,
You have to read like the first issue to get what's going on.
right, and some people have a problem when I do a drop in and I comment on a comic when I haven't been, but I'm like, okay, so if it turns out I want to read this book and I need to go read it in trade, my sampling of an issue as it comes out is my approach path to that, right? If I like
Yeah.
what I read, then I'm like, okay, I mean, just like a TV show, right? If a TV season is in run and you haven't watched the whole thing, everybody doesn't necessarily go back to the beginning of the season, right, to get into it. They watch like the episode that came out like that week, and they're like, oh yeah, I do like this. Let me go back and like go ahead and spend the additional time to work through all the stuff. So again kind of like Love Romances #1. It's an interesting piece to land like in the industry given the market.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Vertigo is there because the core capes and tight stuff fund the ability for other writers to go off and do this stuff. So it's good. I personally gave the issue a 6.5. I definitely part of that was like my inability there's like zero exposition in the book at all, right? There is nothing that tells you like what the setup is or the story that's going on. It
Yeah,
picks
just
up.
continue from the last issue.
Yeah, right. So in that, and when there's zero, and I know that the industry has leaned more towards lesser exposition, but I'm like, gotta give me a little bit of a crutch, right, to lean on, rather than always presuming that everybody who's coming to your book has read like the preceding 3 issues. So, I mean, even just for like the person who missed like the last issue, right, read issues 1 and 2, but for some reason missed #3, you gotta throw them a bone to help them get into it. Let's go on and talk about Return of Wolverine #5.
All right. The Return of Wolverine is the writer is uh, Charles Soule, artist is Stephen McNiven or Niven, I think. Inker is Jay Lyston, colorist is Laura Martin, and letters is VC Joe Sabino. So this is like the final issue of Wolverine's return. Like is a mini series of him returning, and in this issue Yeah, it's the final issue of that series, and it starts with Wolverine talking to no, it starts with, yeah, it starts with Wolverine looking for Festhrone, which is like it's this villain that revived him from his grave and started using him in experiments and stuff like that. So he wants to go find her because he's been manipulating her and messing with. In the previous issue, he messed with her head a little bit because there's like two people that he saved and was like caring for in this place because this is like the whole this first phone actually created some type of facility where she because the thing is her ability used to control the dead and she made this whole world where that she gives a life to all these people that had died. Like she gives them all their goals and dreams and careers and lives, whatever they wanted. Yeah, so they live in this facility and they work for her too. So that's what she tells Logan what's her job here, what she does do, and then Wolverine doesn't like all this thing going on. He doesn't like that she's controlling people and doing whatever there is to their lives, and he doesn't like that he's being manipulated by her, and he tried to go kill her, but he finds out that is a hologram. It's not actually her. She's not actually there, and she burns his skin, and he heals back, and he tries to go to one of the satellites, and he sees a whole bunch of people working in the satellite, and he wants to he asks them if he knows where First Phone really is because obviously that wasn't her there. That was just a hologram, and they say they don't know where she is. No one knows where she is. They're just controlled by her, and they have to do what she tells them to do. And so he wants to destroy all the satellites, and he ends up finding ways to destroy all the satellites with the computers, and he wants the satellite that he's on to be destroyed, but he wants the only way there's no way for the people to escape, and he said Wolverine doesn't care. He just wants to get out. He wants the satellite to go down, and the people start panicking, and all of a sudden a bunch of men come in and decide to fight Logan, and after he defeats them, um what is it? He's fighting. There's like some memories of Wolverine talking to himself because I think there's like a whole bunch of clones of Wolverine in the facility that he was in, and he has some memories of that. He's thinking back to that, and he continues fighting, and then first one tries to stop him, and Logan just keeps saying that you're not gonna stop me. I want out of here. You can't control me. I want to go back home. So she decides to let him go, but she says that she's gonna do something to him in the future, and she doesn't that he's not gonna like it when she has control over him against like people that are close to him, and they're not gonna realize it if it's Logan acting this way or is her doing the work, and he just wants to get out. The satellite burns down and it shoots down, and then it goes into the ocean, and there's like a boat, and Wolverine ends up on that boat, and then the story fast forwards to um it fast forwards to him in the X mansion, and he notices that even he knows someone's there when the door opens, and that's where it cuts off. Um I noted I give this issue a 5 2.0 because it's just I don't like how this story ended. Because to me, it's just like Logan did not have any sympathy for those people that were in the satellite. He just didn't care that they were gonna die there, and the satellite just burns down with the people in there, and it's just like, okay, Wolverine, you're not gonna care about those people. I actually thought you cared about people. You said it earlier how you care about these people being mind controlled by her, and all of a sudden you don't care about those people that were in that satellite and you let them get burned as they enter the earth because the satellite ends up being destroyed. And yeah, and those people don't escape, they end up dead. So I just didn't understand that, and to me it didn't seem like Logan at all. So another thing is that he doesn't what bothers me in this entire story is that they I remember in the last issue Logan finds out about the first phone, the villain that's under this whole operation, and the X-Men went to go. They find out that Logan is here, and they go save. They went to go save him, and they couldn't defeat the soldiers that were fighting. I mean, they couldn't defeat the soldiers and Logan because Logan was mind controlled, and he was. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's mind control, but she has the ability to control the dead. So she was controlling him to fight the X-Men, and all of a sudden the X-Men decide to retreat. They decide to evacuate, and they don't even bother saving him. They just leave the situation, and it's just never returned back. And it's just because to me, I thought the X-Men when because Kitty Pryde mentions that she's not gonna give up. She's gonna do whatever she can to save Logan, and she just doesn't. She gives up, and everyone decides to retreat to the facility that Logan was in, leave him there, abandoned, and it's just to me it seemed very out of character. I sort of not like I like the first 3 issues, but the fourth and fifth one just was garbage for me. The art is great. I love the art by Steve McNiven, but the story just not good for me, and I just didn't enjoy the story anymore. And it's just this whole editorial with Wolverine because it's just you don't know. There's different continuities going on with Logan, and Logan was in Infinity Wars, and uh apparently, when I read Infinity Watch #1, the spoilers, uh you find out the Wolverine Infinity Watch issue. You find out that the Wolverine that was in Infinity Wars, the event that came out last year, was not Logan. It was a different alternate Earth Logan that had the Phoenix powers, and he was giving the Infinity Gems to different people. And it's like, did they just come out with this in the last minute because the story that was Return of the story that Charles Soule came up with for Return of the Wolverine was not the same story that Jerry Duggan had in the Infinity Wars. So they decided to come up with this bogus story that wasn't Logan, that was a different Logan from who knows where, because they haven't explained where that Phoenix Wolverine comes from. He is just some mystical Wolverine that came out of nowhere with the Phoenix powers. And it's just I just hate that there is no I don't know, but I feel like there's when I'm wondering, is there like a meeting when it comes to these comic book writers? Do they actually tell each other what are they gonna do? What's the game plan? Because it just seems like people just doing their own thing willy nilly, and no one knows what's going on in each other's books, and it bothers me that people could have control like this in a company like this. It's just, oh, I'm gonna put a character here, even though it could cause plot hole issues with another book. I just don't care. I just want the book to be this way, and I'm gonna tell the story my way, and I don't care how many plot holes it causes for other readers to read other books. It's just to me, it seems like editors don't do anything again. It just, I don't know. I don't like to sound critical of a company, but I know it's Marvel and DC both do this, and to me, there's no organization of how to put things in place when it comes to these comic books. It's just a character could be dead in one issue, and he could be dead alive in the next. Like, Hugo Strange dies in Deathstroke, and then he appears back alive again in Detective Comics, and they're one issue apart from each other. And it's
Right.
it just gets me annoyed that things happen like that.
Well, I definitely feel your pain. I'm gonna push on and go ahead and talk about Manowar number 24.
Yeah,
I
a long rant.
That's fine, and I didn't read it, so I actually don't have anything of value to add to that conversation. Very quickly, writer Matt Kint, artist by Thomas Giorello, colorist Diego Rodriguez, and letters by Dave Sharp. So the situation is that once again, Elric is hunted by armored mercs who all want his armor. It seems like this has been the scenario of Manowar every issue since time began in a lot of ways. Now, I dropped off of it after, I think it was Venditti who did the big run on it.
Yeah, let's 50 issues.
Okay.
I like that one better.
Yeah, so I bounced after Venditti completed his run. Still, this issue does exactly what Manowar is supposed to do, which is provide a big, macho, aggro, righteousness-fueled fight anthem of a story, and that's exactly what you get here, delivered in spades. So the story features the kind of villains that you love to hate. They are arrogant. They are kind of dillwads, the classic sense of the term, who inspire you to hate them and wish them to be gone. There's really not a ton of complexity in the story, right? It's just, look, there's a bunch of bad guys and they want your armor, so either fight them or they will take it. So this issue does a bunch of seesawing back and forth where alternately, for some reason I keep wanting to call him Diego, where Alric keeps getting attacked, and then as he gets back into scenarios that he shouldn't be able to come back from, he pulls off these kind of last stand hits or combat maneuvers and makes it through until the very end, where he is attacked, I think, with a knife at some point, and then thrown several miles away, I think, which is kind of what takes the fight out of him to a great deal, at least as far as we can tell. What you get, it caused me to have a little bit of shakiness in how they stuck the landing on this. You have him caught or attended to by a female character who I don't know, and again, I'm not a full-blown expert on Manowar lore, but again, if you're going to slide a character in on the last panel, and you have no exposition, that's going to cause an impact. And yeah, I get it. We'll probably definitely find out who that character is. For those of us who don't already know next issue, but yeah, I wish, even if you did the cliche thing of like when she shows up and holds him in her arms, if he would just say her name, right, so we would know who that was supposed to be. But alas, they don't. Now, the artwork here is what really does it for this issue. It is amazing and gorgeous. It looks like a painted picture. Tons of detail, and it's very much akin to, so Titan Comics has a lot of French and Swedish artists working for it now who have crafted stories, that basically come out of the, in some cases, the mythology of a given region of the world. But there's a number of these guys that they have doing books, which are larger order books. War of Crowns was one of them that I read earlier this year, and then the girl who I can never remember what the titles of those books are, but they did another the follow-up is kind of sequel to the first 4 books or whatever in comic book form, so that's a new arc on its own. But that art reminds me of what Giorello does in this comic. The art's just exquisite. It's well formulated, beautifully colored, all sorts of trappings. of like I said, painted portraits on every panel. So almost every panel in this book, you could pull it out, put it on a canvas, frame it, put it up in the hall, and I think a lot of people would buy it. The panel work here is really good. It's also inclusive of a round-shaped vignette and letterbox panels, which I thought was really interesting. It's kind of like what, again, the book, this is a regular 24-page issue. You pop it open and flip through it. It looks to me like a graphic novel easily. So at the end of the day, I also gave this issue an 8.5. Steven, did you read this issue and have any differing thoughts or opinions?
I didn't read this issue because I dropped Manowar
because
a
you were
long
unhappy
time
with it
ago.
up until this point, yeah.
And I also heard that they're relaunching the series after issue 27 will be the last one.
Right.
Because I think this book did not sell well, so they relaunched it with a new writer.
Right.
And I did not like Mankind's run on Manowar. It was just, I don't like that he put him off world into space, and
right.
He does come back to Earth. I mean, obviously you see that he's in Earth now.
Right.
But I just didn't like that he's so separated from
the rest of
people that he lived with, and his wife and his children and his friends. And
so did you
took him so out of place, and I just didn't like that aspect.
Right. Did you read Matt Kint's run on Ninjak?
Yeah, I did read it.
Okay.
I did like that one.
Okay.
I do like Mankind's writing on Ninjak, and I did like his writing on Rai.
Okay, yeah.
A futuristic,
right,
bloodshot type of character.
Yep.
I did love that run. It's just, for me, I don't think he wrote Manowar that well for me. It just didn't work. It just didn't work with me for the character. I just didn't find the stories particularly that interesting. It just wasn't for me.
Okay, so we are over an hour. Let's go ahead and try and push through. You've got Stevie
Jones,
Purple Daughter #2. That's the
final
review piece of the review segment.
Yeah. So this Jessica Jones Purple Daughter #2 is written by Kelly Thompson. Artist is Matea De Luis. Graphic designer is Carlos Lowe. Letters is VC Corey Petty. So this issue starts with what is it? Jessica talking to Daredevil, asking for advice on how to deal with Kilgrave, and he tells her that you can use some technology, or you can try to focus on your willpower to not let him control you, because that's what he basically does. He focuses on his will and his power abilities, because his abilities not like everyone else. He could control his he can be able to not let Kilgrave control him because of his abilities, which is not a great explanation, but whatever. But he said you could use some tech, so Emma decides to think about that, and not Emma, Jessica decides to think about that, and you see her spend time with her daughter, telling her a bedtime story. So she goes to bed, and she overhears Luke Cage and Iron Fist talking about his daughter. Yeah, he talks about his daughter. Luke Cage is wondering if the kid was his, or if the child was ever his, or is it Kilgrave's? And Jessica is just hearing over that. She starts crying, and she's going through a series of emotions there. And she walks in, and they notice that she heard everything that they were talking about, and he said Luke Cage does talk about he's gonna take care of the kid. He doesn't care if it's Kilgrave's or his. He's gonna do what he has to do. He's a father, and he's gonna be with Jessica no matter what. And Jessica was happy to hear that, knowing that he would still be the father if somehow Danny Cage is not his Luke Cage's father. It's not. So yeah, they had the discussion, and uh, Jessica Jones said that she has to go meet up with somebody. Can you take care of Daniel Cage, Danielle Cage? Yeah, and so Iron Fist and Luke Cage decided to take care of the daughter while she goes meet up with Emma Frost, and they have some discussion about what's going on and what she needs to use her for in this situation with Kilgrave, and talk about her daughter and how she needs her help. So Emma decides to go help her. She said that they're gonna meet up later at some point in time later in the issue. Jessica Jones decides to do a series of investigations where other people who had purple children, because she finds out that there's other people who have kids um with Purple Man's DNA on them. They also have children that are purple skinned, and they going through life troubles with that. And Jessica Jones investigates them and tries to see what's going on, but she really doesn't get enough information from them because they're very secretive and they try to avoid giving her any source of information. So she ends up leaving, and all of a sudden, when she's in the park, Kilgrave's daughter is starts attacking Jessica Jones. She's like mind controlled, tries to shoot her with a syringe, but it doesn't work. I mean, Jessica Jones fights her off and doesn't let her get shot. So she tries to Jessica decides to go to where she finds the purple children, which is a whole bunch of kids that Kilgrave made a bunch of children with his abilities. It was in Daredevil series with uh, Mark Waid. It was Mark Waid's run that he had a bunch of kids that turned into they call it purple children. It's just they were with abilities of Sabotage Kilgrave has. So yeah, they decide to talk, and she brings Emma Frost to come in and find out who did this to her daughter and stuff like that. So they go into the room. Emma Frost gives Jessica this type of technology that no one can enter her mind in, and after that, there's a whole bunch of people attacking Emma Frost. She gets shot with some syringe, and now she's controlled by something. It looks like then they fight. Emma Frost is fighting Jessica Jones, and she's able to knock her out. And then a whole bunch of other civilians start attacking her. Even Luke Cage comes in and starts attacking Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones fights them off, and well, she fights the civilians off, but she doesn't fight Luke Cage off. She tries to, and he knocks her out, takes her to a room, and oh no, it's not really. Jessica Jones does end up knocking out Luke Cage, and she goes into the room, and she finds out that the whole thing that's behind the person that's behind the situation was a new son of Kilgrave. Apparently, he has another son named Benjamin, and he doesn't have any powers. So his way for him to have the same powers as his father, he decides to do some blood work, some blood transfusion kind of thing, and somehow whatever he's doing is allowing him to control people, and he ends up he ends up breaking he tells Luke Cage to break the tech that she had, and somehow he has control over her, and the issue just ends right there. I decided to give this issue a 7.0. I did not like the story too much. It was very weak this time around. The art was beautiful. I did like the art. It's very detailed. It's like the best art I've seen in comic books with Mateo DeLuis. He does such a great art in here, but to me the story felt very weak. I just didn't understand what was Emma Frost's purpose in here. Like it just complicates things because to me, Emma Frost, she and her personality is like of a way like she's not gonna do something for someone willingly unless she's gonna gain something in return. She doesn't just because she's not the type of person. She does care about people in some way, but she has some selfishness that she wouldn't care about someone fully. So it's just weird that Jessica Jones is not gonna give her anything or she's not gaining anything in return for Jessica, and she's just, oh, I'll just do this for you for no reason at all whatsoever. And it just doesn't make any sense to me because in previous continuity with Emma Frost, she hates humans and she's gone into this whole evolution that she hates humans and she just only wants to work for mutants and get what mutants want for their lives and she became like a the way the original Magneto was. So it just seems kind of weird that she's working with Jessica and Jessica is like she's superhuman and she's not a mutant at all. It just seems weird that she's working for her and has some compassion towards her. To me this is not like how Emma works for me, especially not the stage that she's in right now and the turning point of her character. So it just didn't work for me. It just felt like it was out of character for her to work with Jessica Jones like this. And it's just I just didn't understand why Emma, when she enters the room, she didn't know that there's a person there with a syringe to control her. And it just seems weird that in order for Kilgrave's son to control people, he has to shoot them with a syringe. But some reason he doesn't shoot Jessica Jones with a syringe. He doesn't inject her with a syringe. And somehow he controls her at the end of the issue. That didn't make any sense. And it's to me in order to they don't explain how he gets control over Luke Cage because it's to use a syringe on Luke Cage is kind of difficult because his skin is unbreakable, and every time they take Luke Cage to the hospital, they can't use any needles on him because if they use it, the needle breaks. So I don't know how they work that out, and they don't explain that. It's just, oh, he just has control over him for some reason. So it's like, okay, how is this? How is Kilgrave's son's ability really work? Explain that to me because he did not explain that so well in this book. It was poorly explained, and it's just, and how did Jessica Jones find out about the serious investigations of people who had purple children in the life? So that shouldn't that her question her to make her think that, oh, maybe my daughter is not Kilgrave's daughter because there's other people that are in the same situation she's in. And they could have just done some paternity tests to prove it, but they don't do that, which is kind of weird. And it's just, the story is not good for me. It's just, and I don't understand. To me, Jessica could have got another telepath for this situation. She could have gotten Jean Grey or Psylocke. Why did you put Emma Frost, who has very complicated personality issues in comic books? It just makes the more story more difficult than it shouldn't be. But yeah, that's my rant on it. But yeah, that's it. I'll go to the next one.
Yeah, well, why don't we have you go straight into the best thing that you read last week, and like I said, let's try and push to wrap things up.
All right. The next issue is Miles Morales, Spider-Man #3. It's written by Saladin Amin. Artist is Javier Garron. Colors is Daniel Corral, and letters is VC Corey Petty. So this story is still going off of last issue where Rhino and Miles Morales ends up meeting Captain America in the same area where they find the kids being kidnapped and using powers, whatever. So in there, they Captain America and Miles Morales and Rhino start working together. They try to figure out where they could find the facility of where all the kids are. So they do end up finding the facility where all the kids are, and they run into this villain called a Snatcher, and they fight him off. Yeah, they fight him off, and after they defeat them, they actually find the kids that were missing, and they call the cops, and they take Snatcher, and they decide to end the day. It's a very rushed through story. They end the day there, and uh, what is it? Captain America said that he has some congresswoman to help the kids find their parents and return home. So Rhino ends up finding his his niece, and the situation is solved. And Miles goes back to school and finds out that the girl that he's talking to, she says that, oh, my brother is home. They found him finally, and they they end up, after that conversation was over, he takes her out to the movies, and the issue ends there. So I decided to give this issue a 9.0 because I really like how Miles is written in this series. And I know I'm not sure people are I'm not sure there's be any controversial, but to me, I did not like Spider-Verse that much because to me they changed the character of Miles. I didn't like that Miles was into art in that movie. It kind of lost my interest into that movie because to me, Miles is more of a science kid, and to me, they even show that in the Marvel Spider-Man cartoon that's gone on the Disney Channel that he's into science stuff like Peter Parker, and I like that element for Miles, and he's very intelligent in that stuff. And in this book, they actually show him being into science stuff. It's just like very interesting because there's a certain part in the storyline in this story that when they go to find out um where the facility is with these kids, and um uh Miles starts speaking in scientific terms, and I like that about him, that he actually showed his science work in here. Like he noticed there's some thing called pegborkum sulfate, something like that, and does some, he finds that on the floor, and does some, like, he's able to find where he is a finding the lead to where the trail is, where the facility where the villains are, where the villain is with the children. So he uses his scientific skills to order to get to where they are, and I actually like that, and I have some appreciation for that, for that, for that. And I'm just glad that that Saladin doesn't change the character, because I know some people are requesting to have the character that's in the Spider-Verse movie and transfer over to the comic books, and I don't agree with that because I don't like the idea of changing the character just because they don't find science that interesting. They just say, "Oh, art is more interesting than science" for some reason. I just didn't appreciate that change to the character. I didn't want that to transfer over to comic books. So I'm kind of glad it's not there. So
Cool. So this was the best thing you read this week. What was your score on this issue?
I give it a 9.0. I just like the art, and I like the story with Rhino. I did like the Captain America. He did not know how to use technology. I really appreciate that
Right.
he needed Miles' help to use technology, and it just worked so well with the characters, relationships. And Snatcher was a pretty interesting villain to fight. The characters struggle with him, and he has some cool, interesting powers. And overall, I thought it was a very interesting story, and I did like the human aspect of Rhino on it. Is just very human story for me. I really appreciate that. So yeah, that's about it.
Cool, man. Very good. So for me, the best thing that I read last week was Exo Manowar number 24, which we already talked about at length. So for my honorable mentions this week, we had Justice League number 18, which I think I mentioned I scored an 8.5. The one addition in my honorable mentions was Incursion number 1, a Valiant comic written by Andy Diggle with pencils by Doug Brathwaite. And my review score on that was an 8.0. So overall, a pretty good week. Steven, what were your honorable mentions?
My honorable mentions was it was 8.0 all the way across. It's Black Widow 2, Black Order number 4, and Unstoppable Odds number 5. I all gave them 8.0s. That's it.
Okay, very cool. And for my pull list for the upcoming week, I'll be pulling Detective Comics number 999, Fantastic Four number 7, Superior Spider-Man number 3, Life is Strange number 4 from Titan Comics. Forgotten Queen, I'm not sure exactly what number it is. I have number 1
it's
there.
Number 1.
Okay.
It's the first issue.
Okay, I thought it may have been out. So yeah, Forgotten Queen number 1, another comic by Valiant. Daredevil number 2, which will be my first drop in on is it Zdarsky who's on it now?
Yeah, Zdarsky, Chip Zdarsky.
Okay. Savage Sword of Conan number 2, Sideways number 13, The Flash number 65, and The Terrifics number 13. Steven, go ahead and take us out by running down your pull list for the upcoming.
All right, my pull list is Action Comics number 1008, Age of X-Men, The Extremists number 1, Avengers No Road Hall number 3, Batgirl number 32, Batman Beyond number 29, The Books of Magic number 5, Captain America number 8, Captain Marvel, Braver, and Mightier number 1, which is just a one-shot. Daredevil number 2, Detective Comics 999, The Flash number 65, The Forgotten Queen number 1, Freedom Fighters number 3, Invaders number 2, John Wick number 5, which is the final issue. Justice League Odyssey number 6, Marvel Comics Presents number 2, Outcast number 39, which is Image, Shazam number 3, Sideways number 13 is another final issue of the series. The Silencer number 14, Star Wars Dr. Alpha number 29, Superior Spider-Man number 3, The Terrifics number 13, and X-Force number 3. Okay, that's it.
Very cool, man. Well, thanks everybody for joining in on this episode of What's Your Issue, episode number 20, where we briefed the comics that shipped the 20th of February 2019. On behalf of myself, my co-host, the E2KG Network podcasting channel, and the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube, that's going to do it for us. My name has been Agasicles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, happy hunting, and stay safe out there. We will see you guys right back here next week to talk about those nice, juicy comics that we just ran down in our pull list. So if you have any thoughts or opinions on anything that we discussed or want to suggest a piece of content or any improvements that you'd recommend, hit us up on Twitter at E2KG Network. Thanks so much, everybody. That's going to do it for us. We're out.
Later.